Okay, so welcome to the Travelplex Digest. And for my travelers, I wanted to give you an update as there has been a new update concerning what it will take to enter into Tanzania. And I want to comb through this with you because when I first saw this, I was floored. I was thinking, oh, what in the world is going on? Tanzania is, like joining all these other countries that are requiring all these different things for COVID 19. And so then when I read it again today, and I'm telling you, y'all, when I first saw it, it was almost hard for me to sleep at night. But then the Lord had to give me a peace. He gave me a peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding, that as we are committed to doing His will and following Him, He will continue to lead and guide us. Remembering that Proverbs 3:5-6 promise, which is to trust Him with all our heart, lean not unto our own understanding, and in all our ways acknowledge Him so that He can direct our path. So, with that stated and keeping that in mind, because look, just remember we already know that things are precarious right now, up in the air, and at any moment, any country can completely change what they're requiring. We have personally been through this ever since this COVID era, and so we are quite familiar with the potential volatile changes that can take place, and you don't always get a lot of notice for that. And that again is the reason why I recommend highly that you get a that you invest in a cancel for any reason policy for your entire trip. Again, if you need to do a revisit on the video that I've already posted about purchasing travel insurance and how to go about doing that and how to go about choosing the right one for your situation. We are about the point where we can pretty much kind of give an estimate of what we think the whole trip would cost. The only pretty much wild card so far will be what the expenses will be for our trip to Tanzania. However, with Israel, as far as accommodations, I am in the final stages of really processing that so that hopefully we can have a better idea of what to expect on that end. Um, but at this point, the main thing is I want us to focus on what is going to be required to travel into Tanzania. And this is from the Tanzanian US Embassy.gov website. And you want to always make sure, I do look at third party people who are blogging and trying to stay up to date, but again, like this has just happened as of Monday, February 13th. There was an update in January as well. So and we just can't always be up to date with every country, even if you are a person who's a traveling coach or travel blogging or whatever the case may be. So you just have to keep on top of these things. So, as I was stating, there has been some recent developments as of February 13th concerning what is going to be required for going to Tanzania. Okay, so the entry and exit requirements for Tanzania are there COVID related entry requirements for U.S. citizens? The answer is yes. Okay, it says all travelers entering or transiting, meaning even, either you're going to be staying in Tanzania or you're passing through Tanzania. Mainland Tanzania, because there's Tanzania, the mainland, and there's Zanzibar, which has a different governing body, although they're still one country, but there's a different person who's handling things there. So they do have different requirements. And even when I was going in 2020 and in 2022, this was also the case. So you have to be familiar with both. So if Zanzibar is in your target as a place to visit when we go to Tanzania, make sure that you stay abreast of whatever it is they're requiring. It's one thing to just be doing a layover where you're staying on a plane, and it's something completely different when you're talking about now you're getting off on the land. So it's good to make sure that you're aware of whatever their requirements are. And I believe they actually cover some of that in here. So we will. So all travelers entering or transiting mainland Tanzania or Zanzibar are advised to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So that is very critical to pay attention to. When it says mandatory, that means that there is no way around it. When it says advised, it's more like saying you are recommended. You know, this is not a requirement, but this is a recommendation. So always keep that in mind. This will help you to navigate through travel when you're seeing different changes taking place, because it means that if it's advised, then you don't have to be vaccinated. Now, what it typically means is that you may not have to be vaccinated, but there may be something else you have to do if you are not vaccinated. So let's keep reading. It says travelers entering or transiting mainland Tanzania or Zanzibar are not required to present a COVID-19 vaccination certificate or test certificate unless required by their airline, transit destination, or final destination. So what this means is that if where you are going requires that you have a test before you go, then you will be required to take the test. So if we were not going to stay in Tanzania, but we were going to say, hey, let's say we were going to go to Kenya next. And let's say Kenya says, we need to have a PCR test from you, then you would have to take one in Tanzania, and it would have to be negative before you be able to board the plane to go to Kenya. Since our situation is we are going back to the United States, this has no application to us whatsoever. Okay, so, or final destination again. So if you were either transiting through Kenya, and usually even with that, like if you're transiting and you're only going to be in the airport, most of these places, and again, but you still have to check, but most of these places have like a time limit. So in other words, if you're going to be there more than 12 hours, then yes, now we require something of you. If you're just going to be there for an hour in a layover situation, then you don't have to worry about that. You just would pick up when you got to your next destination, unless the next destination, meaning your ending point destination, requires you to have the PCR test. So if the ending place requires you to have the PCR test and you're still leaving from that airport the same day, you still would have to take the PCR test. Again, this is not something we have to be concerned with because Tanzania will be our last stop before we come back to the United States. Okay, so let's keep reading because it says here, there are, however, reports of some travelers being asked to provide evidence of vaccination upon arrival or a negative COVID-19 test if not vaccinated. Okay, so again, this is probably due to things changing so much depending on when you go and depending on who's working, because you have to imagine it's just like in the United States. Okay, you have high turnover rates in all kinds of places. You have people who may have gotten a January memo but didn't get the February memo. So either way, my thing is, this is something that we have to be aware of as something that can change. So today this is the requirement. We don't know what the requirement will be by May. That's just a fact. That is the risky part of traveling during this time. But one good thing is, because we are traveling during months where typically you're not prone to getting sick. You know, May is not typically the time where you have to worry about the flu. You know, most people don't get sick during that time because of the weather. So, you know, there is some benefit to having it during this time. And again, I've seen this change where, one minute you got to give a PCR test. And in fact, in our last trip, we had to have a PCR test to get there. And the very day we got there, everything changed. And suddenly you don't have to have one. Same thing was going on with Kenya because we had a friend there who was saying that they had to have at one point, to travel to Kenya, you had to have a vaccine. And then they said around the same time that we were there, that was all cut off. So these things change. And I believe even insurance companies understand. That's why they've even started putting into their policy COVID-19 kind of like addendums to them, because they know that if people are uneasy about traveling when COVID might be an issue in a specific country, that they're going to probably want to change their dates until a more acceptable time. Or, sometimes they'll offer just give you the money back. But again, just make sure whatever policy you choose to take or you choose to purchase for insurance, that it covers whatever scenario is most comfortable for you. If you are one who travels a lot, like I know we travel a lot, so I would be okay with an option that said that you can't get your money back, but you can take the money, you will lose none of it, and it can be used as a travel voucher for you to change your dates. And so then of course I would just take that trip and make it for tabernacles instead, something of that nature. So there are different options that are available. Just make sure whatever option you're most comfortable with is the option you take. If you're okay with just, saying, okay, well, I mean, I get a refund, but I can at least just change the dates, then take that option. If you say, hey, no, I just want my money back, then, make sure you purchase the insurance that offers that as an option. Okay, so, moving on. Please see additional information on testing and health screening procedures below. So here, the Tanzania Ministry of Health released Travel Advisory number 12, effective January 12th, with updated entry and exit requirements for travelers to mainland Tanzania. Now we see that the Zanzibar Ministry of Health released Travel Advisory number 15, effective February 1st, 2023, with updated entry and exit requirements for travelers to Zanzibar. So the next question here is a negative COVID-19 PCR and or serology required for entry? The answer is no. So you do not have to take a PCR test to go. However, for surveillance purposes, port health officers may perform a COVID-19 rapid antigen test free of charge for randomly selected travelers upon arrival. So just be advised that is a possibility that you could be randomly selected. Are health screening procedures in place at airports and other ports of entry? The answer is yes. So here we see enhanced screenings are in place on arrival. Anyone found to be symptomatic will be immediately isolated and handled per local health protocols. Travelers may be subject to random testing free of charge on arrival. And I would submit to you that part of what would be the determining factor on whether or not they're going to test you is if you are exhibiting symptoms. So one of the things that I highly recommend is to stay tuned to the Travelplex Digest, because I would like to also share with you some things that you should take with you so that you can stay well. Because again, traveling now is a lot more relaxed. There's no longer requirement of wearing masks on planes. People are like what they always have been. Anytime you travel, they're coughing, sneezing, whatever they're going to do. And everyone doesn't cover their mouth appropriately or effectively or quickly enough. So, you just have to be mindful that this is the world we live in. So that being the case, you have to protect yourself. And I've always been one of those people who feel like it's not the world's responsibility to keep me safe. Well, first and foremost, if you are a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach, the blood of Yeshua covers you, so you are safe no matter what the scenario is. Um, but it's not anyone else's responsibility to keep me safe. It's my responsibility to keep me safe. So knowing that there are things that you can do preemptively to reduce your likelihood of becoming a victim of an airborne virus or cold for that matter. I don't want to catch a cold. I mean, I've had COVID and I've had the cold. And really, be honest with you, the cold has been worse. So I don't want to catch a cold. I don't want to catch COVID. I don't want to catch the flu. I don't want to catch any of these things. So that being the case, there are some things you could take that will help, fight against any of these types of issues that we find ourselves having to deal with. So just keep that in mind. Um, so quarantine information. Are U.S. citizens required to quarantine? No. There is no quarantine requirement except for travelers who test positive upon arrival. Travelers who test positive will be advised to self-isolate in their accommodation. So you will not be taken off to any concentration camp, any isolated facility that is sponsored by the government. You will be required to isolate wherever you will be staying, which is just a responsible thing to do. If you know you were sick, you shouldn't be going around in the public infecting other people unless you're at least, if you have to be out, you at least appropriately covered so that you can protect others. Okay, so COVID-19 testing. PCR and antigen tests are available for U.S. citizens. Rapid antigen tests are available for departing travelers on a walk-in basis at the international airports, including Terminal 3 of the Julius Nyerere International Airport in Dar es Salaam, Kilimanjaro International Airport, and Abid Amani Karume International Airport in Zanzibar. Travelers planning to use an airport rapid test should arrive multiple hours early and contact the airport for additional information. The cost for a rapid test is $10 in mainland Tanzania and $25 in Zanzibar if less than 24 hours before departure. Their cost for a RT-PCR test is $50 in mainland Tanzania and $80 in Zanzibar, but the cost can vary depending on where the test is done. Travelers taking an airport rapid test from the mainland should register through, and here's the link, and list both their origin and destination as Tanzania in the system. Okay, so here's the information you'll need for that. And of course, this is the link up here. So you can always come back. And I would suggest just keeping this link and, at least once a month, just checking to make sure that there are no changes. So you can know what to expect. U.S. citizens can book a COVID-19 PCR test through the Tanzanian Ministry of Health website. Travelers in Zanzibar can book through the Zanzibar MOH website. The MOH states that you will receive a text message with a link to your COVID-19 certificate when your results are ready. Okay, so COVID-19 vaccine information. Are vaccines available in Tanzania for U.S. citizens to receive? Yes, they are. Tanzanian citizens and non-citizen residents age 18 and over are eligible for vaccination. Visit the FDA's website to learn more about FDA-approved vaccines in the United States. And of course, here's more information. United Republic of Tanzania's Ministry of Health page of COVID-19 and Ministry of Health Zanzibar. These are websites that I would highly recommend just checking periodically anyway. Okay, so I was trying to see if I went to one of these websites to get some information, but okay, so but I did last night go to, I think it was maybe this one. Because it's not working. Okay, so I guess we're gonna have to just go back there. But bottom line is, I wanted to make sure you were aware of what has been taking place. Now, many of us have our questions about what it is that we are willing to submit to, and I fully understand, and there are various degrees to that. Um, One of the things I do highly recommend, and I have already started looking at, is I'm personally concerned about the PCR test and anything going in my nose because I have had some undesirable sim- symptoms or strangeness happen after getting one. So, however, there are saliva tests that are available. And so, one of the things that I am looking into, and perhaps on a follow up video, I will hopefully have an answer to, is should a PCR test be required to enter Israel or Tanzania um, at some point before we go? I'm looking into whether or not there will be any saliva tests that we can possibly take. Now, keep in mind that that will also probably mean that those tests will be more expensive. And trust me, just the regular PCR tests are expensive. But the good news is that often these can be covered by your HSA account or insurance and things like that. Well, at least that was last year. Of course, as we know, everything changes. So it's very possible that they will not accept that. But hopefully, there won't be any major changes between now and the time of our trip. And as stated, I will be updating you very soon concerning things like the accommodations, and definitely looking at having a meeting with those who've already committed and are ready to go concerning kind of the itinerary for Tanzania, because in Tanzania we would probably have to take some in the country flights to go from one destination to another. So it's going to be important to go on ahead and secure those flights in advance, and then we can come up with what we should look at in terms of covering expenses for the whole trip. Because any internal travel into Tanzania, like any flights that we have to take to go from here to there in Tanzania that we purchase in advance, we can include this cost in our travel insurance budget, so that when you purchase your insurance, you are able to calculate the total cost, or as well as expected expenses for things like airplanes that you're going to take, whether it's in the country or not, such as accommodations, any tours that you paid for that you can't, that's non-refundable. These are things that can be added into your budget for your travel insurance, so that all those things are covered. Um, Now, again, some things you don't have to worry paying necessarily in advance for, because we do know people who can, make a lot of the connections for us, and who does touring. So that may not be something that you would have to necessarily put into your budget, because you could have the option of paying for that when you get there. So then that is understood that, if, obviously, if you don't go, then, and of course, because you don't pay until you get there, you don't have to worry about being out of that money. So that doesn't have to actually stop anything that you're going to do. Um, in fact, with Tanzania, because of exchanging and not really having a lot of options for receiving money internationally from outside of the country, um, and since cash is king, in other words, they take U.S. cash and they take uh, Tanzanian T shillings. So since that is king for most of these tours, that's really what they're going to want anyway. A lot of them, are, at least the people who I know, they don't have the ability to take your credit card and that kind of thing. So cash is what you would need to have, and that's something good to know. So this is why we will have a meet and greet, so that you can speak to the people who will be organizing your tours, and they can tell you what the cost will be, and you can bring that when you come so that you can just have the cash to give them. Um, okay, so with that being stated, I think we're going to end this video. That is the only update that I have so far. I will be checking with Israel, but when I checked Israel last night, as I checked Tanzania, there were no changes. There's no requirements to be vaccinated, and there's no requirements to take a PCR test or requirement to be quarantined for any period of time. So as of to date, everything is still open and ready for business in Israel. But if that should change, you will receive a Travel Israel update on what? The Travelplex Digest. So make sure that you are staying tuned and you are watching the videos, and I will continue to also send the link to your email, but I really would like for you to go on ahead and make sure that you are following so that you can get that directly from the website as opposed to just relying on my email. So, okay, you all have a blessed one. Shalom.